Hey everyone, my name is Valentyn Vynogradskyi. Before starting my topic is like point of view of team lead, I want to say that I'm not doing presentations a lot, and probably the last one was before I became a team lead. And you may think that, you know, being a team lead, it's not nervous to do a presentation because you're talking all the time, but it's not. It's like, it's super terrifying even still. So apologize for any like mistakes or whatever. And another thing, I always wanted to do a presentation with my own drawings. So I did. I'm shitty drawer, but, you know, hopefully you will enjoy it. Let's start. Before going to actual topics, I'd like to go through some intros, and the first intro would be a context, because we're all different, and path to being a team lead is a bit subjective. So my experience is shaped with the decisions I made, with the project I did, and that is why my experience and the circumstances under which I became a team lead would be maybe different for you. So maybe your experience would be different of mine, and decisions and etc. and experience at all. I have 8 years of experience as a full stack developer. I worked with a JavaScript, with the .NET from probably third version. I became a team lead 3.5 years ago. I started leading teams from 4 to 10 people. Why does it matter is because I have rather wide stack of technologies rather than deep, and that probably mean that the regular or like average senior developer from Ukraine or like from post-Soviet Union or other countries like Western would be a better, deeper technology stack educated rather than I am. That is why I'm trying to find people who I can rely to, etc. So I'm not trying to pretend to be a leader developer in the team, because that would mean that it's actually a bad sign for a team, because, you know, I used to work only in outsourcing company. That means that maybe in project company it would be a different experience. And I always work in a multi-team project. It means that I have a lot of horizontal conversation with the other team leads, not only like technology stack, features, and development, but a lot of communication management. So horizontal communications were a lot. And yeah, and by saying highly competitive environment, I mean multi-service stacks where a lot of frictions, where you probably moving from distributed monoliths to a microservice system, which or from the monolith to the microservice system, which basically means that you have a lot of context at the same time, which and probably if you became or you already a team lead in a one team project where you have a strict scope, you will have different challenges that I had, and that is why you may not face the issues I faced. The second thing I wanted to talk to is the expectations. The expectations is very important thing about any discussions or any social interaction, and properly set up, they could be a powerful tool, but improperly set up, they could lead to a disaster. So this is a small story I draw. So this is Lucas. He has a perfect mood. He wants to do a surprise for his girlfriend Jade, and he bought a flower and probably a chocolate. And he comes and thinks, okay, I come, I knock the door, she's open, I give her flowers and the chocolate, and she will be happy. I love her so much. And this is Jade. She's wrapped in a blanket, she's sitting on the couch, and she's watching her favorite series. She made the chocolate for Lucas, and she thinks, okay, Lucas come, he has a key, he will open the door, he come and join me, I prepare him a chocolate, and we will be watching Netflix all day. So the next thing what happens, I mean, this is a bit hyperbolized, but the next thing what happened is that expectation met, and they are not fit, and probably, I mean, they maybe not broke up, but Lucas started knocking at the door, and he thinks, okay, I have a key, but I always open with my keys, and today I'm knocking, so she probably have to realize that I have a reason for this. And to be honest, with the chocolate and the flowers, it's not really easy to get these keys. And she thinks, okay, he has a key, why he's not coming? I have a reason for that. I'm sitting here, so the expectations are not met. Expectation from our discussion. It's not how to be a good team lead. The whole presentation is not how to be a good team lead. My imposter syndrome will not allow me to do such talk maybe in the long term. It's not how to become a team lead, because as I said, the path is subjective. Probably it may be different for everyone, and I don't know the tutorial how to become a team lead. This is more about how it is to be a team lead in a, like, with the context from the previous slide. Yeah, as always. Despite the fact that I say this is not a tutorial how to become a team lead, it's actually, let's a bit touch a topic how you would, will, or did become a team lead. There are two ways. You can ask for this, or you will be asked to do this work. And this is actually interesting part, because let's look at the way of your career. I don't know now or in the past, but it's probably for a developer it looks like trainee, then junior, then middle developer, then senior developer. And when you become a middle developer, that actually means that you already half a year a middle developer. So probably you get the promotion when you're doing your responsibilities for a half a year. But for a team lead, it's not like you are already team lead. You're asked to be a team lead, and it's completely shift of your position. It actually contains much more different work from what you already did before than what you will be going to do. And I heard this a lot on the different speeches, but I was surprised myself how much it differs from the regular senior developer work. And I see a lot of, let's say, misunderstanding between the people I work with who understand tech leading differently. And I always say like team lead or tech lead, and I like to talk just a bit about the difference. And despite the fact that there is a clear difference in Google saying, okay, tech lead is this one and team lead is this one, and I will not give my own, let's say, vision on this. The problem is the whole society is thinks like everything they want. I actually know one person who thinks that tech lead is a person who can manage a couple of team leads, and I don't know why. And the problem here is not in actual difference, because you probably won't feel it, because you have a persons who are hiring you or who are giving you a job. And if persons have their own understanding of what is team lead or tech lead, no matter how they call it, you will be doing these responsibilities, or you will be going to a different company. Like if your CTO saying, okay, please prepare the sprint for the next sprint, and you say, I'm not a Scrum Master, I'm a tech lead, so give me technical task, he will probably not have you on this position, because he expects team lead or tech lead doing a sprint. And so people who are expecting the certain responsibilities from you are actually defining this term, and they are using it interchangeably. That is why I'm not following which term I will be using exactly through this presentation, but they actually to me means the same. Now let's go to responsibilities. Through this 3.5 years of being a team lead, I actually did a lot of different things, and don't try to read everything. It's like it's super disorganized, and I did it on purpose. I will try to a bit reorganize this during the talk. So the blue stuff is the technical stuff. I will talk about them a bit later. They are like, this is the proof that they are on the same places. Green stuff is a management stuff. And you know, the management stuff is the same amount as the technical stuff, and you're not doing this as a senior developer. So be prepared that this is coming to you. Architectural stuff, testing stuff, and DevOps stuff. They're also waiting for you there. And you probably don't have to do them in the same time, but most probably you will be doing them in the different time frames during your like tech lead career or team lead career. So this is how they look, a bit organized. So this is basically everything you know from a senior, middle senior developer, like interviewing, mentoring, technical feedbacks, coding, implementing features, production issues, performance bugs. Maybe sometimes you are involved in some estimations and technical plannings, urgency, etc. This thread is everything, almost everything new. This is the planning. We will talk about this a bit later. You will be hiring. So sometimes, I will not say like you will be hiring, but sometimes you'll be hiring. Sometimes you will interview a person, and then DM will come and say like, do you take him? Do you want him in your team? And do you kind of commit that this person is the right fit? And when something breaks, it's actually, you take this person. So it's your responsibility. No one will give you a person and say, this is the good one, take him. So you will be driving a team, and team is a key. So you will be looking at the people, you will be interacting them daily, you will be monitoring their mood. If they will have conflicts, you will solve these conflicts, etc., etc. We'll be talking about this later as well. And the one important thing for like my particular context is that this horizontal interactions, it's not only synchronizing the scope with the different team leads, because sometimes you have a developer without the work, you can borrow him to another team lead who like has much more feature to implement. You can borrow him, but sometimes there are a cross-team features that you have to address, and no one actually will drive them other than you team leads together. Like for example, bringing up automation tests to a whole project. If you're just a senior developer, you're probably sitting and waiting for a task, and if someone says you to implement automation testing, you will. But the key is to be that someone who will say, and you have to drive this. It's like pushing something that is not going on itself. You have to push it every day to make it go. So automation tests, you come up with idea, you go to other team leads, you communicate, you agreed on the same approach, maybe you do some spike, but all this is driven by team leads. It's not like someone else somewhere higher may take this decision. Sometimes they are, but most probably they will come to you and this will return to you anyway. Architecturing chunk is like becoming a team lead. You're a small architecture, especially in a microservice project. You will actually be working daily with the architecture. If you have one, you will be suggesting him ideas, because in the microservice architecture, it's really hard for architecture to manage, drive, and maintain all the things. That is why team leads are closely work with architecture, and some chunk of work is given to them. So team leads come up with architecture and give a like architectural review where they like confirm your idea or do some modifications, but we will be optimizing, reviewing. Sometimes there will be performance issues, so we'll be re-architecturing what you did, and that will happen daily. Testing, again, in ideal world, you have a test team who is like qualifying, doing sign off, but sometimes they don't have access to production, and probably PO should do this, but you have access and you have time, so you have to go quickly test it. Yeah, you will be going testing, set up pipelines, set up DevOps thing. You still will be doing this. You're lucky if you have a good DevOps team, but sometimes you just go and write this, I don't know, GitHub pipelines or GitLab pipelines or Azure Dev or whatever. Probably forgot something. Yes. And yeah, this is actually a small story. I was starting to, I was half a year through the team leading, and we have a really bad PO. He was like doing nothing almost. He was from the customer side, especially when you are in outsourcing. You can go to customer and say your PO is shitty. You can work with him. You have to manage the reputation of your outsourced company. So you are doing everything politely. And we had big review in Kyiv where were all tech leads or POs from our side or Scrum Masters, and we did like team review one by one the whole like year. And I had a plan. I wanted to ask our delivery manager from the customer side to describe me all the responsibilities of a team lead, Scrum Master, and PO. And when he described the PO responsibilities, I will say, okay, he was not doing that. He did nothing, so I risked nothing because he was, he definitely didn't do what he had to. But DM was better than I am in politics, so he said, tech lead, Scrum Master, and PO should work as a unit in order to deliver it. That means that I was screwed. I had to find another way. That PO was fired, like in 3 months, but I lost that battle. But I still remember this quote. It's a good one. Regarding the management part, there is a point. I'm not super good at management and everything, but there is a point for a company when they from the small garage cozy company will become a big enterprise. They had a round of investitions or investment, and they starting to hire, and they understand that people from the garage who did the job, they actually not capable of managing the job, and somewhere here only 50 people, it becomes a bit of nightmare for technical people to manage, and a lot of companies die on this day, on this threshold, I would say. So for a team lead, it is exactly the same. Like if you are joining the project where you have maybe 30, 40 people and bigger, you probably should expect a lot of management work. Your coding will be, I don't know, code reviews and whatever. We'll talk about this a bit later. But to me, the more people, after some threshold as well, it goes down. When the company became big enterprise, they manage all their processes, and tech leads becoming a small people who are responsible for a particular responsibilities that are already written, you probably can expect this to go down. But there is a certain amount of time during this process of growth of the company where a team lead will be doing almost everything. You don't say I don't have this responsibility in a tech lead book. You just do what you're supposed to. Now, I would like to do some small dive into the planning. So PO comes to you and say, okay, I have a business feature. And don't get me wrong, sometimes this business feature is epic with the two, 3 words. It's actually bring action plan. That's it. And there is a planning session, year planning session for 2023. And you say, and PO say, okay, Valentyn, please estimate this action plan. And you say, do you know the design? He said, no, I don't have it. We don't have design. We will prepare in September. And I say, okay, what APIs will I call? Do I have a bring a new microservice, or there is SOAP or anything? He says, well, I don't know, but we need it for tomorrow. And you have to accommodate. It's a part of your job to bring the answer. So you say 5 sprints. You say 5 sprints, and and probably if you have a lot of experience on this project, it might be already thought through estimate from your experience. Like I did the previous thing and I had the same situation, and probably I know that this will be in the same place. So maybe 5 sprints, and that's it. That's the all information you have, and you have to provide the 5 sprints. So you say 5 sprints when between the time when you give this estimate and you actually have to do the job, you do it yourself, or you ask one of your developers to investigate, and you understand that you were lucky and it is a 5 sprints, but this is 2 sprints for UI developer, 2 sprints for BA developer, and there will be testing somewhere there. So you can fit it in a 3 sprints with this structure. And let's assume this is the first feature, not to influence from this side, but in the same time, after this feature, you starting estimating other features, and you no longer have the clean left side because you already have this structure in front. So you probably have to again put backend developer somewhere here to start simultaneous development. So it's like a small work breakdown structure, and you have to keep in ahead the capacity of your developer, the probably support that you are doing for already released product. Maybe you have some, as I said, cross-team initiative that requires one of your tester and developer to do something on the side, etc., etc. So you're doing this one by one, and this becomes something we call a WBS, which is like work breakdown structure. But the very important part of you being a team lead is being flexible. I've seen people who in this meeting say, okay, 5 sprints, and after they realize that they are doing this in a 7 sprints, they start in pushing, overtiming, they like sit for 24 hours and trying to fit to this 5 sprint estimate, which is, in my opinion, is not a key point of a team lead. Key point of a team lead is the, like, immediately when you recognize the estimate is different, is going and modifying the structure, not silently, like talking to PO talking to his product management, etc. But you have to shift and balance this work breakdown structure through the year. And normally this is pretty acceptable from the management side, because they expect they're not stupid when they ask like in the middle of the year estimate something you will be doing like in a half a year. They understand that plan may change, and they actually change from their side. So you shouldn't be scary of this REMA-defined structure thing, which is the one of the biggest points of the team leading. Team. It's a key part of a team lead, because when you become a team lead, you're no longer like Messi. You now become like Jurgen Klopp or Guardiola or someone, but you're no longer a rock star. You are kind of a team manager who is organizing, who is thinking long term, who is thinking about the overall team mood, so they have a motivation to work through the year. You're thinking about the overall pressure from the management that goes to your team, and you have to protect them from this pressure. And in the same time, you have to satisfy the management with the delivery you are doing, because otherwise, team that is not delivering may have a really good mood, but it will be fired and they will have a bad mood. This is not a like tool for you to manage the team. It's just in the head. So you always keeping the level of expertise of every developer in the team. And the key points for me also, not only like C#, JavaScript or soft skills, so this guy can talk to someone and explain his idea. But also there is like ownership and visibility. And ownership, let me give you an example. So if person have a good ownership, no matter how good his technical skill is, he will take the feature you gave him for implementation, and if he encountered that this feature is looking shitty or behaving strange, or it's not fit into the product, he will come and tell you, and you probably re-architect this thing, or you will go to product owner and say, okay, this doesn't seems good, and product owner, if product owner accept that, okay, this area is not visited by the users, and this is only for administrators, so we don't care how it looks and how it behaves, and animations, we don't care about them. It's totally fine. It's decision of the product owner, but the developer who is working on this should raise the question, should be an owner of the feature, because I've seen people who did everything right. You know, you have the animations there, it's working, but for example, the paddings or like just text is shifted every time you click on something, and it's readable, it's fine, but it looks cheap. And probably this person with a big, like with a good ownership will come and say, like, okay, can I spend like another 4 hours, but I sort it out and it will be looking really great. And visibility. Sometimes you find a really good, talented developer, you are giving him a job, but you understand that he will disappear for 3 weeks, and you will not know the branch he's working in, like whether he's working on it, the tickets will be in progress for 3 weeks, and probably, you know, you have to know this person and rely on him, to trust him to deliver this in 3 weeks. So visibility sometimes may be important, especially when you are mentoring someone. So this also something to keep in head. If someone has lower ownership and lower visibility, you probably will not trust him to give him a feature and disappear for 3 weeks. This is something you have to consider every time you interacting, planning, because you say, okay, this is pretty hard thing, and probably if I will split it in chunks, we can do it in 2 sprints. But if I give it to this guy, he will bring it me in 3 weeks, but I will not hear from him, and he will not answering, or may not answer, and sometimes, you know, he has a good mood, but you know, you have to consider this. Another very important thing is interaction with your team, and that's a very subjective, intuitive thing. Is that, like, I have a quote here. It's pretty common and everyone knows it. So you never give a negative feedback in front of the people. You always go to someone one-on-one and giving him a negative feedback. On the other hand, the positive feedback is always something to share with everyone. That is how a person feels better. But what I mean is not only this. So this is kind of good explanation of the small things you have to think or feel, but probably you should be attentive to the persons you are leading. And that means that if person behaves differently on the meeting, if maybe she or he sounds sad, it's not a big harm to go in direct and ask whether everything's fine. Or if person, like, if the team is working on some feature for 2 months and PO returns to you every day with the urgent bug fixes, everything should be pushed in the production tomorrow, etc., for 2 months, at some point you probably have to understand that your team is under the pressure, and maybe stop for a second and think whether maybe you should give a break for team, because, you know, you have to be attentive to your team, to people you are working with. You have to actually protect them from the management, because management always loves to come, for example, from, like, by passing you, he can come to your developer and say, hey Vladislav, please do this for me. It's like, I think it's like 2-3 hours. That's not a problem. And your team, they sometimes very sensitive to this, and they, okay, that like CTO came to me and said that I have to do it, that means that I have to do this. But the proper, like in my opinion, the proper way to set up the process around, if this is like certain circumstances, is that there should be a polite way, say, okay, please discuss this with Valentyn because I have like strict scope and delivery capacity and blah, 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 blah. So you have to think about your team when you working. And another thing is that, like, here on the management side is a complete chaos. POs want certain features, and at the same time they want bug fixes, and at the same time they want to research something that we'll be doing in next year. In the same time, your DM and, for example, your architecture wants to bring overall quality on the certain level, so they want the, I don't know, quality gates or automation testing. So a lot of people want a lot from your team, and instead of being leading developer who is doing everything and says everyone else what you have to do, sometimes your job is stop doing coding and start structurizing these things, planning, and putting your team in the structured, ordered way, and leave this pressure on yourself. Sometimes the only job you have is to stop these people being affected by everyone else outside, and that is very important, because your mood and your how you put yourself in front of your team may influence on them and may influence on their code quality, on their delivery, on their overall mood, and whether they want to stay with you another year. Yeah. About coding. So as I said, when you become a team lead, I have another like talented team lead in my team, and he says that his working IDE is Teams, because it's inevitable that you will have a lot of conversations, meetings, plannings, and they probably have like taking part in the meetings, these plannings, and there will be a lot of meetings, a lot of talking about like writing emails, writing documentations, and this will be a good project if you have like 30–40% of time coding, but that never happens to me in 3 and 5 years. I used to work in a small project back in Ukraine 8 years ago, where we have like one project for one particular customer, and we had a tech lead. He was super talented, and he was coding all the time. And we had like a couple of meetings, and that's it. But myself in a microservice with a lot of teams and all this, you probably won't have it. Okay, disclaimer, you won't have it in an 8 hours work day. If you'd like to code outside this 8 hours, like be my guest. But in 8 hours of a day, no. And one more thing, this is actually a bit manageable. So if you really love to code and you want to save it on your side as a part of your activity, you have to do certain steps to save it. For example, the context switch for a team lead is a normal environment to operate. So like every freaking 15 minutes, someone reaches to you and say, hey, Valentyn, I have a question. And you have to somehow manage your calendar in a way that you will have this 2 hours of thinking, because like, to be honest, sometimes I found myself in a situation where I'm leading, for example, 5–6 different microservices, and for example, web UI, which is like for every team, and all teams working together in this web UI. And for example, I have a desktop client where I'm working, like where I'm leading. So it's like desktop client, microservice architecture behind it, and administration on the web. and I don't know how to run any of those. I mean, I know, and probably if I think like 3 hours, I will remember what particular service, because like 3 Node.js service, 1.NET service, Electron desktop application, and React application on the web. And theoretically, I know how to run any of those, and we have readmes that says they are running, but sometimes there are like certain environment variables that point to particular environments. Sometimes Electron, and the React application is running okay, but for example, there should be special VPN to run it. And when you sit and say, okay, I have 45 minutes to code, and you think, okay, where can I code? And you start in doing documentation or something else, because you understand that you'll spend 20 minutes remembering how to run certain service or certain language, because you know JavaScript, C# and something in database. So you have to manage your context switches if you want to save the coding on your side. This is something to think about. This is actually my own topic. I mean, only about myself. I'm not sure whether you will experience any of those, or is this something you ever think about when you think about being a team lead? But it actually hits very hard. So I will give you an example. When I started a team lead in a small team, I think it was like 5 people, we were actually we were getting knowledge from a Vietnam team, and we were picking up the products they did after them, and we did like daily knowledge transfer for them. And I would say that it's really hard to do a knowledge transfer when DI tie is device type. And it was like whole meeting of such DI ties. In the same time, this is politics, but this separate vendor from Vietnam, they are trying to prove our own, like our mutual customer, that they are more capable of doing what we are trying to pick up from them. And that was actually leading to a politic games, like the production is down and our team have to bring it up, but it's on the Vietnam team VMs, and only they know how to reach it. That is why we have to say to our customers that we cannot do it without the Vietnam team, and etc. etc. So a lot of knowledge transfers, a lot of features, a lot of conversation, etc., etc., etc. And that leads to my new year. I think I spent 19 hours on the 3rd of January at work, and I lost sleep at some point, because it's not because you worry about something or you lost something or there are some nervous. You just getting used to solve the smaller problems, and your brain comes to a I don't know, rhythm where you solve the problem, and when you trying to go to sleep, your brain cannot stop. So it's starting thinking, what I forget, what I'm doing next morning, And actually, it's not only me, it's my couple of my developers and my Scrum Master went on the antidepressants. So we had, it's not like it's happening to you when you become a team lead. It's something you have to manage, and if you would be prepared for this, you probably can deal with it, because we did manage to solve this. So at some point I got the team and say, okay, we are working 8 hours. If someone comes to you directly, you resending him to me, and or sure. And if you have like extra scope, we throw out something from our current scope. If you have urgent fixes, okay, we can do them because we are professionals, but after that we have a rest, etc., etc. We set up certain rules, and that, you know, it's that help. Not like always, but that actually helped. You're thinking about everything. You're thinking about everything you are doing, everything you're going to do, what you're going to do in a year. But that actually for a context switch. The interesting stuff. So when you are senior front-end developer, or just like when you are a developer, you are used to doing a job. You're sitting, you have your coffee, you have your headphones, you may, like, I don't know, sometimes people watching the movies, I don't know, but listen to the music, and you doing your job. And it's probably, if you are more senior guy, it's probably 1, 2, 3 days of work. When you stop doing this job, you are doing your personal life stuff. You are solving, I don't know, medical issues. You are taking your child to school. You are helping your mother with some, I don't know, how to install application on your phone. You are doing normal stuff, and you have actually rest from your work, and you have rest from your personal life. When you become a manager, I think it's like for all managers, not only for a team leads, but when you become a manager, you're actually doing at your work exactly the same what you are doing in a personal life, and they start merging. So you kind of you're calling to someone, you are thinking about something small, or like small limits of time, you're being interrupted, you change your context, you picking up what was in that context, and you're switching back, you try and pick up what was in that context, and that actually gives you small amount of rest. Like start going to mountains, or like I like driving, for example, because when you're driving for a long time, like 2-3 hours, you're actually in one context, and it's awesome. And you know, it's boring, but it's awesome. Your brain is I was talking about sleep already. This is too strong word, like loneliness, but you should be prepared that even you are leading a team, you are no longer the part of the team, actually, because like you have a good people, you actually managing them, working to them, but somehow it's still it's still shifted. They are a group, and you probably more closer to a group of the, I don't know, architectural team and team leads, but they are the same. You know, it's not like a club of a team leads. When it's especially probably visible when you're working in the same room. I never had that. I always worked in a distributed team, but be prepared that you have your own private life with the friends and everything, but you're no longer the, you know, team member that makes you like feel as a group. You always already somewhere outside, because you have a bigger picture, and it's a good sign if you are bringing this picture to people, but sometimes this picture can overload them. For example, if there is a, I don't know, if you know that the work, you have a work only for 3 months, that may be a bad sign for all developers. You know that there is a like friction, and work may appear, or may like even 3 months may become 1 month. But when you given this all the people like on your team, that may influence their mood and everything. So you have to be careful. So you start hiding information from them. You starting let's say manage their mood, and that becomes like separates you from them like almost immediately. And at the same time, they are asking your opinion, they are asking your solution decision, and that also separates you. Technical degradation is actually really interesting. In the same time, you have a lot of access to different information. They starting talking to other tech leads, you're starting talking daily to architecture, to CTOs, and you picking up a lot of information, or you changing the project and you're going from, I don't know, GitLab to Azure, and you picking a lot of information. But in the same time, first of all, you understand how many things you are missing, because of that green area somewhere here, remember, like with the management activities. So you're starting and trying to pick up that part. In the same time, you had your own plan of the self grow. Like, for example, I want to read domain driven development, or I want to check out the new version of the React or .NET. And in the same time, you have all this new information, and that leads to that you probably picking information from what is given to you, rather than like having a separate like 1 hour for reading. It would be really great from you to set up your hour for like reading news, or reading a book, or reading a, you know, science fiction, just to relax. But you will feel technical degradation, because your team will be talking about new version of React, about new cool feature there, and you like last time you read the news was like 3 years ago. Imposter syndrome. This is really interesting thing because you're starting to talk a lot. You're starting to talk a lot with a different interesting people. You meet a new DevOps and he's starting to talk to you about the new GitLab actions or automated CI/CD that automatically pick up all your builds, setting up the pipeline and deliver automatically to a production. Then on the next call, you talk to a CTO who talks about the investment in a, for example, company he did last week, and then you come to another meeting and product owner discussing, I don't know, some business way to resolve particular problems, which doesn't allow. You actually knew that product owners can estimate the work you are going to do, and they like, there is a meeting between CTO who saw me, I don't know, 5 times, and my product owner who probably understands what we are doing, but on a UI level, just to hold some buttons, etc. And our Scrum Master, and they like, okay, this will take 5 sprints. This probably will maybe 2-3 months. Okay, the plan for a year is set up, and then they like, Valentyn, this is your plan for the year, and you start thinking, okay, only this chunk will take a half a year because there is a legacy and we have to rewrite everything. Otherwise, you will stuck for a year just trying to understand how to actually understand this at all. But they do. They estimate and they have certain, rules probably, or books for how to estimate. But you're talking a lot to different interesting people. You're seeing how many things you're missing from different areas of different, I'd like to know more about DevOps. I'd like to know more about C# because I have senior developer who is saying me something like, I don't know, let's rewrite the service to CQRM. Like, okay, I know what is CQRM. And he says like, and we will use Aurora. I like, Aurora is a free version, cloud version of the Postgres. I'm like, yes. And he is operating with the stuff like naturally, and you getting chunks of information you heard from somewhere and something. And you starting actually comparing yourself to all people you're talking to, and you actually lose the battle everywhere, and you start thinking, okay, I'm not so smart as I thought. And yeah, that's growing. And this politics, I think politics is a hard topic. So especially when you're working in outsource, like a lot of people working in outsource, like who's from the product? Okay, so I don't know, maybe in product is different, but in outsource, you not only think about the delivery and the quality of your feature, but also how your particular outsourcing company is looking in front of the customer. And sometimes if the management, especially if the management on the customer side, you may write a relatively bad project, but if for every decision customer made, you have a mail saying that you suggest different thing, that's probably a good sign for your company. And that driving me crazy, because sometimes you want to do a quality product, but management on the customer side shifts you to this, and the only thing you can do, and you should care actually, is that when there will be a post-mortem, to provide a proper explanation why we go in every way. And that actually hits you a lot, because sometimes you are delivering something, and in a half a year, a CTO comes to you and say, Valentyn, why you wrote this? You don't remember even what you wrote, but you have to find an email saying why you wrote this. And so this is something less related to a psychology itself, but it's always on your background, especially when you are working in the, in the outsourcing or multi-team area. You're always thinking about how to properly provide everything, how to talk to people. You can say like, your PO is shitty. You have to say, I don't know, like there probably were some issues on the product management side, so let's review them on like weekly review or something like this. So you can say what you think sometimes. Yeah, this probably self-explanatory. So the things you will be missing: coding, sleeping, working on one task at a time, certainty. What you're probably gonna like: architecting. I like architecting. Talking to architects, they are so smart, and you learn a lot from them. And actually, you will be doing some chunks of work, and when it's starting to be working, it's almost the same like you hit a run in your idea. So working architecture is much cooler than working code. Power, you're a tech lead. Learning new things. So as I said, planning could be interesting sometimes, especially when you already spent some time on the project and you understand what you're planning. Discussing requirements is very funny because sometimes PO comes to you and say, okay, this is design, and you start asking what's happening if there is an error, or what's happening if this is going behind the threshold, and they're so confusing, and they go and try ask to their manager. Sometimes it's funny. And leading, yeah, it's depending on whether you scared of everything above, probably you may like leading. And yeah, my questions. Questions 1, questions 2. Yeah. No questions. No questions. Seconds.
Do you hear me? Okay. I have two questions. First, is there any way to evaluate team lead work? Like, how would you, if you would interview team lead, what would you ask him? And the second question, how many times per day you regret about being team lead?
Thank you.
You should have 2 of these. That's a team leading, actually. I will start from the second one. Like it's a small piece of private information for me, but during this 8 years of my development experience, I wasn't really in love with coding. So sometimes you run something after 3 days of struggling, and it does feel great. But to be honest, I'm not the guy who is reading how, for example, Rust works when he has a free time. So I was always reading science fictions, playing football or video games, and when I became team lead, I understood that this is actually what I love. So I don't know how it happens. So, but I'm not regretting that I'm team lead, but I suspect that someone may. For the first question, this is really good question, and this is related to imposter syndrome I was pointing about. When I actually changed the company because of your question, just because I was so scared that I joined my previous company. It was awesome, and I spent there 7 years, from a middle to a team lead with a 3 years experience of leading, like not 3, like maybe 2.5, and on my background, I was always thinking about those people who like senior in one company, the people who became like one project seniors, who became a senior just because they spent 10 years on the same project and they know everything there, and they needed a salary raise, etc., etc. So at some point, I started thinking, will be I'm good enough for another company as a team lead, and I started gone through the interviews and things. And the interesting stuff is like my experience interviewing as a team tech lead is the reason I made a slide about difference between team and tech lead. You probably have to like take an HR, sit with him and ask about every responsibility you are expected to be doing to understand whether she is looking or he is looking for a team lead or a tech lead. Because, they just throw you team lead or tech lead, but it doesn't mean anything. That may be everything starting from the like 90% of time coding and 10% of time saying like mentoring someone to actually 100% of management. And the interviews actually differs in the same manner. So you actually being interviewed to be leading some particular team in particular project, and people asking questions about that. So they are asking how you would manage a conflict. Sometimes I've been in an interview in a Proxet that I was talking most of the time. So I was asking a lot of questions: how the team structured, how the pipelines works, what the tests, what the like process, sprints, everything. I was asking, and probably that convince people that I'm capable of doing their stuff. Sometimes they are giving you a test task. My test task was for middle developer, I guess, maybe junior, so there was some algorithm. But I can say how I do interviews for a like team lead or like senior developer. I have a small task for a Fibonacci sequence in a shitty .NET fiddle that is working with the bugs. And there is a small bug which I encountered when I created this task, is that if you're not looking at the version of the C#, you're actually having like you can have a different version of the C# and your string interpolation will not work. And doesn't matter. You have a problem in your code, and you have a poorly written requirements to your task. So it's like console log, string interpolation, Fibonacci sequence. And I understand that people who are working for like 4 and 5 years, they can implement Fibonacci sequence. It's not so hard. But I expect them to ask, for example, what do you want from this Fibonacci sequence? Do you want them in a string separated by the comma? Do you want the array of int? Do you want the summary and you just wrongly named the function, or you want the nth Fibonacci sequence from this function? So I expect people to ask questions, what do I want from this task? And it's not like I'm just throwing at them. I'm giving them hints like, think of me as a customer, or you can Google, whatever. So I had one guy who Googled just Fibonacci sequence C# and copy pasted. That's probably a wrong way to go through the interview. And second thing is this bug in the string interpolation. What I expect from the experienced developer is first, make sure that your code is okay. It's actually done by like Googling string interpolation C#, and you look into MSDN and see how it's written. So you match MSDN to what is written, you recognize that it's written correctly, and then starting thinking somewhere outside. But like I've made through the 20 of interviews, and people like, they see Fibonacci sequence, they starting with the Fibonacci sequence, they hit run. They're not asking me what I want, so they read just like they expect it to be done. Then they hit run, and it's running, but there is an error, and they think that the error somewhere in a Fibonacci or the return result. They start thinking, what should Fibonacci like? Okay, this return arrays of int, and it's not compiling. Okay, then probably I have to do to string and whatever. And just because they started from this Fibonacci sequence and everything, they stopped thinking about string interpolation, documentation, and everything. So I'm looking at how a person thinks and what questions they are asking. It's not like the only task. But now you can be interviewed by me and you can success. A lot of questions, a lot of views. Sometimes you ask him not about how to write a code, but your impression of some particular features, and that's how it is.
Thank you for your speech. I have some interesting question. After coronavirus became popular remote work, after it, full work for two companies became popular. We can see a lot of information and resources about it. How do you think about this situation? And should such cases be detected if we not see any problem with team productivity? If yes, how? Thank you.
So, okay, wherever I know people who does this, and especially in the leading when your processes are set up, that might be so. When you're spending in the project, for example, I don't know, 3 years, and you actually sorted out everything, you configured your team, and like everything is stable, you probably can do your work in like 2 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, and well, that might work out, right? Theoretically, but for especially development, there is a rule, I think, in Europe that's saying that people like mandatory should not work more than 8 hours a day, and that's questionable because we all work like 10, 12 hours a day. I'm working from phone like all the time. I mean, I don't have an hours a day, so I'm just going to shop mall and I'm typing something to my PO and I'm thinking about the future. So, but there is actually a reason for this 8 hours period is the rest of your day, rest from work, and it in my opinion, you are not supposed to aim to a short-term expertise. The best person I talk to, the best person, like experienced person, they have like 20, 30, 40 years of experience. And I know such persons, and they're awesome. They're picking up a lot of things, and I am not believing that you can work 12, 14 hours a day for 30 years. You will burn out. You will stop. I know the guy who was like really talented front-end developer. He was picking up stuff. He was doing great solutions, and the same he was working like 12 hours a day, and now he's jumping on the skis just because he burned out in like 10 years of experience like front-end developers, and he shifted his interest into the skiing just because he could not longer maintain this vibe. That is why you can do this 10 years. You will work for one company for like 2-5 years, and for this company you will be all right. But for yourself, you have to understand whether, of course, if you're handling two companies in 8 hours a day, you're just fine. But you know, this is the personal stuff. You can do this, but you have to decide whether you are aiming to the 30 years career or you're like earning extra salary every month, and then you will sort it out. Actually, the main thing outside of this is your health. It's with the time, with this like team leading stuff, it's hard to maintain the healthy life, and it doesn't matter, like, I know till 40, I wasn't there, but probably till 40, but after that you probably will feel all your decision you made at 20s and 30s. So that's my opinion. I'm not saying that someone shouldn't do this, but and more probably in one company that might be even not noticeable. If you're a good developer and you're using the same solutions, like you have your own templates, probably you will be fine. But everyone should think of their own, area. Okay. Like I would personally not notice this. So not this. So I wouldn't detect the actual fact of working for two companies, but if someone stops meet your expectations, especially when this person already set your expectations, right? When you hire someone, you don't have an expectations other than the interview, and you setting up these expectations, and you probably compare it to the only way you can compare it to the salary, right? You hire senior developer, he's done shitty code, so probably he is not senior developer. But once this expectation set up, you're working with a person half a year, and you expect certain things, and you're doing planning. You're like, okay, Andre will do this feature for 2 weeks, and he's doing this for 3 weeks. And at first you think, okay, sometimes it happens, but it's starting to be a regular thing, and you starting digging and investigating, and you finding out that he's working for 2 companies. If this breaks your plans, this will be, automatically detected. You will lower these expectations, and that would be a mistake. You have to find out what the reason for this. Maybe he's sick, maybe he has, problems in private life. So you start thinking about it, and you finding out this. Probably this have to be detected. If the performance is fine, be my guest. Yeah, but performance is fine for me, but I don't know if it's okay for you to maintain the rhythm.
Opinion doesn't match company's policies, right?
You can hire someone, I was there.
Question, was it explicitly described why simulating and outsourcing so challenging? But why did you choose Proxet?
So I didn't choose the company, I chose the project, and actually it changed after I signed the offer. But it appears that I still got another good project. But when you are a developer, and if you are a smart developer, you're starting doing this already, but I wasn't super smart. So when I was a developer, I was choosing maybe salary, maybe the company reviews, like this is the cool company, they have like cookies or extra salary in the end of the year, or design or whatever. But at some point, you started thinking not only about what you can provide to company, but also what company can give you. And it's not like material benefits, but it's interesting project. So when I was working at my project, I was already knew what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, and what actually I want to do. So as I said, I wasn't really passionate in coding, and probably I wouldn't fit a good company that requires a good single stack leading developer, because if I'm a leading single stack developer, that means that first of all, I'm not doing what I meant to in my head, and second, this is probably the very weak team, and I don't want to work in a very weak team, because I had a official seniority in a JavaScript and strong middle in a C#, but in the same time, like being three years of a leading with the everything I just described, actually, I didn't code for months. That is why, in technology, you're being late already in a month. So I had my own vision, what I'm wanting to do. And when HRs reached to me and we were talking about the projects, I was honestly saying that I'm not a technical guru who will be solving all technical problems. I'm rather a, the guy who is most interested in delivering the interesting product to your customers, but I would like to work near the strong technical people and help them, guide them, etc. So that was a feat. Yeah,
And are you satisfied now?
yeah. More questions? Tricky ones? Yeah.
How to make team building remotely?
So that's actually a very good question, because team mood is very important. And to be honest, I never, like, I heard only once about the remote team building that, in my opinion, probably went well, is they were playing like Don't Starve together. Don't Starve. This is a computer game where you have, you know, I can't explain it. It's like something between Minecraft and Tim Burton. So yeah, but I heard of like meta universes. Probably this is interesting thing. It's like, for example, I don't know, PUBG, this thing on the phone, etc. So computer games probably is a good way to do it. Team building is probably will be an interesting stuff. So for example, if you can go karting on your team building, why can't you do, like, I don't know, Counter-Strike 1-on-1? But in the same time, I understand that it's not something you exchange team buildings to, but this might be a fun activity as well, is involve team in a, like, estimating and planning, not in a crucial way where you're giving the proper estimates, but rather like discussing the architecture with the team, for example, of the feature, or the simultaneous discussions on the requirements and architecture. For technical people, that might be fun. It's not changing the team building, but that influence on the mood in the same manner. But the only thing in my experience that most of the time, most of the people are silent. It's like, it's driving me crazy when you start asking the people's opinion, they're just all muted, and probably one or two seniors starting suggesting something. But like when tech lead arrange like architecture discussions with you, don't be afraid of asking stupid questions or suggesting solutions. That's actually the goal of the tech lead at that time, to start the conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Why
Sorry?
you have overall implementation that you completed,
Yeah.
and why?
Why I'm sleeping?
Yeah.
Probably because I like to sleep. At the same time, historically, during my university or whatever, I always prefer to have a more sleep than learning in the last time. Like when I lose sleep, I actually become a shitty believer.
So what was more about
What?
things that maybe it's a bit like red flag, work more than 8 hours to spend 12, and it's maybe focus on delegation. And actually, what is it about delegation? How do you decide?
Okay, this is the good question about delegation. And first of all, as I said, as a team lead, you probably stop counting hours. It's just because most of your work is in messengers and emails and probably thinking. Actually, I never understood how to differentiate, like how to write a working hours, because like when I'm going home, sometimes I'm thinking about how I would do something in my team, and then I will spend 2 minutes of drawing this in a mirror, for example, and this goes to architecture review. So for a team lead, there's probably not an issue. You just working all the way. you probably allocate, as I said, like rest hours for yourself or family hours. This is like super important, like family hours. I'm still working on this, but super important. You're probably starting to care about your team. So the red flag is your team is like constantly working more than 8 hours. If you hear like urgent bug fix in production, like every day through the like 1 week, you probably start thinking about maybe you should stop and do some code freeze, bug fix. Maybe you should talk to your QA or to understand what the hell is going on, because like constant bug fixes of site releases is a bad. It is something you have to look at. But I think you mentioned like you asked for yourself how to care about yourself. This one, right?
We have about rotation. What do you think about rotation?
Okay.
Even like zero case, maybe delegate more.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. So, delegation is actually one of your tools which you are using constantly. The problem is sometimes the amount of context which is so big that, like, even with the delegation, you sometimes missing things. But you actually starting to gather the information from people. So for example, I'm giving the business feature, and I think that I don't have 15 minutes or it's not enough for 15 minutes to investigate how it's working, because there is a front end, probably there is some animation on this front end, which is complex one. Probably there is some old service you want to get information from, but you know that this is probably a legacy service with a SOAP, so you know that probably your architectural board will require you to provide a solution for a refactoring to immediately separate it in a microservice. And you think, okay, so I have a front end who can investigate how much time will take to do this animation. From your experience, you know that all other things will take like 1 sprint, maybe 1-2 sprints. Then you allocate some spike for your backend developer to think that thing through, and he is bringing you information, and you already, if you trust to this developer, you can start architecturing the whole stuff, and you can bring the to architecture, you can bring the short-term, long-term solution. So delegation, if you're leading and you're not using delegation, you're probably not leading, you kind of trying to mentor whole your team. And yes, I'm using delegation a lot.
For example, in this case, I think is the responsibility that things can get also architecture decision, and you can just say, okay, someone people like want to be an architect, and this would be like a chance for you for job, to do this architecture stuff. And you can just do the and say, see,
the thing is that probably this architectural step happens like takes 15 minutes. Like it's hard to create a big architecture for a whole project, but if the architectural vision is set up, 90% of the time the solution is not so complicated. It's really quick, and it's nothing to delegate. You probably will draw the diagram on the, I don't know, architectural talk while the previous speaker is speaking about the architecture. So this is nothing to do.
Sorry, not the position, but the last question, you can actually communicate with the colleague after, like on the break. We have from our online translation.
What do you think about the future development from team lead? Where to go next, architect, delivery manager, or stay into the position about 10 years? Okay, I got it. Great question. And that actually depends on your leading style. As I said, there are probably, most probably, there are tech leads that you're using more technical approach than I do, and they're enjoying reading technical stuff, enjoying creating complex feature, and probably they will go to the architectural, let's call it, branch, but you should be aware that architecture is also half soft skill thing, because even your architecture and you most often create the architectural solution, there is a need to convince other people, especially management one, that your architecture is better than it was, and you actually have to spend 10 sprints of refactoring everything, and will bring the value. And if you can do this, you know, you can create like super solutions, but you will need an extra person who will be talking for the solution you created. So if you're a technical tech lead, let's call it tech lead, you probably will go to that way. There are also something that calls delivery manager and engineering manager. This is something more management, but with a technical thing. And again, probably somewhere upper my level. The things are different, so I can't like 100% be sure that I'm saying the good information about what is about this. But I see like DM, PM, EM, like delivery manager, project manager, engineering manager, architect, probably CTO at some point. But the higher you go, the wider stacks you should have, and the less deeper stack it will be. Probably at some point you will code for yourself just for fun, and that's it.
So we're switching the language, right, folks? Thanks a lot for surviving. I know I'm the only one obstacle right before the pizza, so bear with me. I'm going to try to be pretty quick, so let's kind of like try to understand like you're still alive. So like let's look. It's kind of like a small ice-breaking session, right? Does anybody understand what the architecture is like, or do we have architects among us doing some architecture? Okay. That's going to be a little bit harder than I expected. Anyway, so right, I'm kind of expressed and excited about your talk, Valentyn. So like the team lead experience, because like I used to be a team lead as well, and like this is like in my career is like I moved from the team lead to an architecture because like I wasn't ready to give up a technical track, right? But it was a kind of a delusion that kind of like I thought that maybe I'm gonna pick, right, a technology and talk with other smart people, right, like architects, smart people. Right, demystifying architecture craftsmanship. So I'm gonna share you my experience as well as Valentyn did. So I'm not necessarily right about the architecture thing, right? So like it just again, it's my overview of it and it's my experience. Like I'm doing it like a little bit more than 4 years right now. So I believe it should work right. You have to do these things, right? Okay, cool. A little bit of me, right? So like I'm also joining the industry like 10 years more, something like that. So the last 4 years I'm doing software architecture or like a system architecture, namely. So mixing a little bit with the solution architecture. I'm gonna try to explain like what the difference is between those. So like you would get it. Yeah. So like about my hobbies, I'm set with guitar. Like yeah, if you give me one guitar, so I'll try to play something for you. Anyway, like if you find it, like yeah, we can try it out. So the project I'm working on and the company is basically the Provectus, right? So it's been mentioned, so I'm gonna give some words about it a bit later. The project that I'm architecting right now, like in doing system architecture, it's called X2X Media. So it's basically a company. It's kind of like consists of 2 companies. So namely, in a few words, it's like a collaborative tool for the developers, or like for us as engineers. Like it could be more familiar as a Git for movie directors, where you kind of like you give a couple of scenes, right? Like you made a couple of scenes of, and you have a couple of clips, and you start collaborating. Like, I don't know, the light in the scene is not okay enough, right? Or like, I don't know, actors in the scene like stayed differently. So you can give the same kind of comments, right? So like, it could be like collaborative, like in a talk manner. So like other people who involved in this field, right? Like in the editing of the movie. So they get the feedback and, you know, like correct the videos and so on. So it's like, and then you start merging the playlist, and eventually the playlist became a movie. We're working with Netflix, we're working with Disney, Sony, you know, like, so the latest thing that you have seen, I believe, probably the Game of Thrones is like the most famous one, The Witcher. So it's kind of like, it's all like, everything has been done by Netflix. It's kind of done with our tool. I think like that was a cool advertisement, right? So Provectus is the company. I would say it has two egos, right? Like the first one is a big one, which is called a consultancy, and consultancy more in like in the ML and AI, right? It's like everybody knows like what the AI is, like artificial intelligence. So it's more about the data-driven stuff. So we kind of like, we pick it up, the select like, or narrow things like to kind of like grow up. But again, so all the data-driven stuff, DevOps. So we have our AI solution. So I will share some of the QR codes, so you'll find even the GitHub repo, so you can contribute if you want. So we have like some of the model things, like, yeah, you can read all the things. And this is our customers that we're working with, like a lot of like, you know, big and cool companies. The another ego is like a more a outsource and out stuff. This is what we argued a little bit with Ina, the outsource and out stuff. So like, I'm personally involved in the project as an out staff. Like, yeah, so I'm kind of like a part of the staff of our customer. Right. So moving on. Yes. So what we're going to talk about? Like, I split up like in the 3 parts. Like, there's 5 bullet points, but exactly it's going to be 3 parts. The first 2, it's more about the philosophy, like my understanding of the architecture and how it works, right? So who is an architect, architecture-based design, why you would need architect if there's some. So second two things, right? So it's going to be more about the pragmatic things. So like I'm going to share with you some of the techniques that I'm used daily as an architect. So it helped me, you know, like communicate to other people, and some of the methods basically, and common katas, like how to do it. And we're going to talk about the overlap basically between the leadership and architecture, because I haven't mentioned it before that if you talk about, yeah, let's kind of move to the who is the architect. Like if you talk about who is the architect, so I like basically describing things like in 2 ways, right? The first one is duck typing. Like, yeah, we kind of like, we're going to provide some characteristic and define the architecture role, or like what he does. Another part is like the dialect is, right? Like we're saying who is not an architect, right? Like we're trying to define the architect, like saying like, yeah, the architect is not the person who kind of like pick up the technologies. He is, but not really. I mean, it's kind of like the last one thing that you're doing as an architect, like picking up the technologies. So as an architect, you kind of like another side of the coin of the business. So like you're doing you're helping business build a product, but from the quality side. And quality side meant not to be a quality assurance like a QA, right? But more about the non-functional things, right? It's like every product it consists of, right, like functional requirements, functional requirements. Non-functional is kind of sounds negative. So in other words, it's called a quality attributes. So this is what architects care about. It's about the quality attributes of the product, right? It's those words which end up with ELITs: reliability, consistency, maintainability, and all the ELITs that you can imagine. So there are a lot of structures like operational ELITs, structural ELITs, and so on. So then we can define architects with kind of like a few characteristics. There's going to be more, so bear with me. So architects, as I said, like, yeah, it does, or it makes the architecture decisions, right? Like, if we talk about the architecture and trying to define what it is, architecture, it's kind of like, in other words, it could be a blueprint of a product, right? For in other words, it could be a roadmap. So me personally understand it like as a process or a practice, right? So architecture is a practice more, so like, and people involved in this practice. So there are 4 key points that defines architecture. It's a structure. It's kind of like microservices, monolith, microkernel, and so on, right? So all the patterns that you can imagine. So then it goes to architecture characteristic, those utilities, availability, consistability, I don't know, reliability, security, and all this stuff. Yeah, security a little bit like without the utilities anyway. All the utilities, right? So then it goes to the architecture decisions, where you as an architect or you as set of the architects, you're making decisions on how you're going to work, right? Or and it could be even like go deeper, like you have a layered architecture. So when you said like, I don't know, request to database only goes from the service layer, not from the UI layer, right? So these kind of things. And the last one is more about the design guideline. It's kind of a language, right? How those decisions are being made. So architecture, 4 points, right? Structure, architecture characteristics, design decisions, and design guideline. So this is what goes for the first one. So in another one, that you continually analyze the architecture. So like as an architect, you have to kind of like make sure that everybody stick to the architecture, right? So like, and it's kind of sort of like round robin trips adventure. So like it's not only you as a person define the architecture. So it's kind of team you work with or like multiple team you work with. So they kind of help you define the architecture because some of the, I don't know, like specifics of the internal code, you know, doesn't make you kind of like come to some sort of a decision that leads you to kind of like a good product, right? So you continually try to work with your team. So moving on, keep current with the latest trends. I think it's kind of like self-descriptive, right? So like you have to be aware of like new trends, new technologies, right? Like or at least new approaches of solving a particular issues, right? So like again, like talking about React, or I don't know, talking about like a state management in React, and as well as like different ORMs in like in .NET world or any other world, right? Like the ORM is like a more common decision. So like you have to be aware of it, or at least you know like not deeply, but you have to understand like what kind of problem solves one technology or another. So ensure compliance with decisions. Again, you have to be cautious about like what decisions been made in the team. So like you have to constantly communicate. You can notice, right? So it's kind of like a mediator. Like if everybody who knows like what the mediator pattern is, like it's a little bit close to it, right? Like you're a mediator between the business and the technical teams, right? Diverse exposure and experience. Again, it just you know it goes skyrocketing down. So it means that, and I think Valentyn a little bit mentioned about it. You don't have to know every single framework deep enough. So you have to be a T-shaped, right? So like you probably have expertise, I don't know, in React, maybe in Java, in .NET, right? Deep enough, but you have to be wider to understand like how those contiguous areas works, right? Like how the state management works in React. Because if you think about the Swift UI, and there is a TCA architecture, right? It works the same way as like Redux, right? So it's namely the same. They even use the same terminology like reducers, pure functions, and so on. However, it's kind of like a programmatic language. So you have to be T-shaped, right, person. Have a business domain knowledge, and it's kind of like again, it's Hollywar topics. So you have to kind of like deep inside the domain that you're going to work with. So like you work with the medicine, you work with the logistic, right? So you have to understand the basic terminology, the basic algorithms of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should be a domain expert, but you have to be close to it or understand it enough, right? So go down, like possess interpersonal skills. This is where basically it overlaps with the team leads or like this is where you care about the people. So as an architect, you still have to care about like people. You have to lead people, some sort of like if they don't have team leads or help team lead to coach them and so on. Eventually, the software development or like building the products is all about the people. You know, like as everywhere else, right? Like any other industries, nothing different. It's all about people because, again, like a few days ago, we talked about one architecture, one of the approach that makes our product solid, and we didn't encounter the human factor. And like, you know, developers, they're saying like, yeah, we're not gonna, you know, follow your architecture because we don't like it. Why? And then the coaching starts, right? So like they fear because they understand because like, I don't know, like they name themselves senior developers and they don't know what it is, right? And like they don't want to learn. That kind of thing. So you still have to talk and work with people. And I think the last one, understand and navigates politics. Again, this is what Valentyn mentioned. So this is the overlaps. So as you as a mediator between the business, right, and the technical teams, so you have to kind of like navigate this stuff. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but you know, some sort of a disclaimer, right? So the technical task is more about like puzzle solving thing, right? So you have already shape of the puzzle. You have to kind of like put the puzzles together the way you see the picture. So the architecture and kind of like a more business side of it, it's more about the modeling, and modeling is hard, right? So like the environment is unstructured, unordered thing, and it's hard to kind of like model it to get it in order and like and so on. All right. So before we go to the architecture and design thing, I kind of like missed the thing like, do we need an architect basically, right? Probably not. If you have like a team like with 5 developers and you have a monolithic application, so you know about it, like everything that kind of like every bits and piece of the application, and you work with the PO, your product management, probably your team lead or tech lead, like, or the most experienced person in your team is going to do an architecture. So that's why like you probably don't need an architect. So it's more about the role, right? Like who's gonna do a design, or who's gonna do an initial architecture. Yeah, probably there should be a person who's going to be responsible or accountable, because I've realized kind of in our language, right, in Ukrainian language, so the responsibility and accountability is kind of like one word, right? So that's why like somebody needs to kind of like be accountable for this stuff. For the companies where you have like a lot of teams and the structure basically like a microservice structure, so every team owns his own microservice, that's going to be a disaster without the architects, because he's going to be a person who's going to try to define the contracts. He's going to be a person who's going to help you, again, keep quality, keep those domains together, and so on. So if you're big enough, right, and you kind of lack of this kind of culture where you need to kind of bring a consistency across all the teams, you probably need an architect. So it all depends. And again, like, you know, like we seamlessly, right, move into the architecture vs design, like what is architecture and what is design, like how are they different? So there are 2 laws basically in architecture. So the first one, and basically it's gonna answer the question, it depends, right? So like everything in the software architecture is a trade-off. So there is no kind of like a good solution, right? So it's just less worse, right? Or like, again, a worse decision, it's just less worse, right? So it depends on the context. So everything should depend on the context you're working with. So that's why everything is trade-off. So the second law is like for the architecture is why is more important than how. So, and it's basically, again, it's part of the culture that architects should bring to a technical team. So the team should be more a mission-based. So they should ask questions. Why they doing so? Like why they, I don't know, doing the authentication, right? Or probably why we doing this button that kind of like, you know, triggers some flow, or what is the flow basically? So like, and that gives the architects brings this culture and gives an understandings basically what are they building, right? So that's why architects helps from this side to the dev teams understand what they're building, right? So what they basically trying to kind of like bring the value to a customer. So there are some small things, right? You know, define like the architecture is more about like high level description of the components of the big system, right? And interaction between those, right? So they're not focused on in implementation basically. So it's more about interactions and like the structure. It's like monoliths, it's microservices, it's synchronous communication, asynchronous communication, like event driven and so on, right? So the design in other hand, it's more about the implementation, the decision. So if we're saying, for example, the communication between microservices should be asynchronous. So it could be events, right? So I don't know, or whatever you decide, like IMPQ or MQTT protocol, right? So it's kind of like more what the technical details, like where it's going to be React, it's going to be .NET, and so on, right? So like in other words, it looks like a waterfall here, like, yeah, so the architect define like this kind of piece and pieces and they do all this, right? The class diagrams, like define the classes, user interface, and so on. But it's kind of like a round trip thing, so like circle, like, so it goes constantly, like, I don't know, like, you find out here that kind of it's not possible to do this way, right? Like, so you go then to to the architects and vice versa, right? So like, it's a iterative. That's why I'm saying it's not actually a sort of stuff like architecture. It's more about the process and practice, right? So moving on further. So we kind of like end up with a little bit of this philosophic thing, right? So we can then Hollywood, right, on those stuffs. So I'm gonna show you the some of the tools and basically those are techniques as well, how you can visualize and define your architecture. So that's why it's called like the art of the visualizing architecture. It's kind of like, I don't remember, Simon Brown who coined this. Yes, this is the person who coined this term, the art of the visualizing architecture, and also he came up with the model which is called C4 model. So everybody aware, right? So what the UML is, like unified, right, model language. So it's kind of one of the tools what we're using basically for the components is the description, right? The classes, maybe database structure. But it's very bad for the architecture. So you see like how overwhelmed, right? Like, so like it's kind of like, yeah, you probably could be a UML geek. You understand. So like this, you know, like black things is it's a aggregation things, so like a part of the composition, right? And so on. So, but it's really difficult to understand to like what are the parts of the system, what the system basically does, like what's defined. So then there like comes like few things, right? Like I'm not going to describe all the, you know, like details or all the techniques, right, about the visualizing the architecture, but like you know, the thing that I used to do and like what I'm using myself. So the Purple model gives you ability to describe your system, to kind of like visualize your architecture in 4 views: logical view, process view, physical view, and development view. So the logical view is like your system consists of like multiple subsystems. For example, you have e-commerce, right? And it could be like a basket service, it could be a order service, customer service, and so on. This is the logical view. It just describes you like what it consists of. So the process view, it's defining like, yeah, where it runs. It's kind of like going to be a I don't know, engine server. It's going to be web API, like where, like in what kind of a process it works, right? Like it runs. So the development view is like, it's basically your code, and the physical view is like where it's deployed, on premise, on cloud, and if it's on cloud, like what kind of a services you're using from the cloud, and so on. And scenarios is basically those use cases, right? I don't know, as a user I want to sign in, right? As a user I want to put in order, and so on. So this is kind of like an approach how you visualize. So like, and each time you do an architecture for some sort of solution, you kind of describe everything in those views. So then it's easy to kind of like get this documentation and understand like what's basically this system or this product is about, right? But there is a gap between the logical view and development view. So why eventually it's kind of like so you have an architecture and you have code, and if you look at them closely, you would understand that they don't match basically. That's why like everybody thinks like the logical view and the development view, it should be like one basically view. So where the code basically describes your system, right? Like where diagrams from your code describe your system. So that's why like the architecture and code gap is solved like in the next model, which is a C4 model, which pretty, you know, like sounds like the same as like a 4+1 model. But it works like a map, like a Google map, right? So like you have a country, or like you have a globe, right? So then you kind of like zoom to a country, then you in country, zoom to a town, and so on, right? So here's like the context that basically describes what the users of your system and what the system basically does in general, right? I don't know, it's e-commerce, and there's a couple of actors like the user who orders, basically, I don't know, the user who puts the content that you can order in future, and so on. This is basically just a description of the context. So then you zoom in and you go to the containers. This is where your probably microservices, probably these monoliths, but with the modules, right, or like layers. So where you describe, there's going to be service for the order, there's going to be service for the basket, and so on. And again, like you click on this particular service, like a particular container, and then you go to the components, right? So like how it's organized. So is it like n-tier layers stuff, like you have a web API, you have a UI and like a database or like any other approaches and so on. Then you can go to the code, right? So like how the code is described. So this is like one of the stuff that I'm using daily. So like describing the architecture, like, or at least we can discuss right internally with the product owners, with the teams and so on. So everybody understand this language. So this is our ubiquitous language. We have context, we have containers, components, and code. And it's kind of like, again, it's comprehended and understand it like a Google map, right? So like you always understand, like you zoom in and you get your perspective, right? And like every level of your organization would understand, like, yeah, probably, I don't know, POs, right, or PMOs, so they don't care about the code, right? So like probably they don't care like about the containers, components, right, how it's built, but they care about like what kind of systems, or like what kind of like the containers in the entire system, like that represents your feature, right? So that's kind of like a ubiquitous language for the architecture and like non-technical people, let's say. But yeah, we're gonna go further to the architecture katas and common techniques. So I'm kind of like, I try to put things that I'm using as well. How you can, so the techniques that helps you define, or at least be more comprehensive about the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. What the techniques helps you to understand the domain better, and then you can work with the teams and so on. So here's going to be a lot of like this TDD, DDD, BDD things, right? So those buzzwords, but bear with me. So it's kind of like easier than you think. So the first technique that I'm using with my teams and that kind of like I work with, it's called event storming. Event storming, it's really perfect thing. Like, I don't know, like have anybody tried the event storming in their practice? No. So it's a cool thing. You can use a whiteboard, or it could be Miro, right? And you use stickies. So the stickies with different colors, and you describe, first of all, your understanding about the product, or at least your comprehension. For example, you're talking about the e-commerce, and if you first describe what the events in the e-commerce could be, I don't know, order added, right? I don't know, item added to basket, and so on. So you first describe the events in the past tense, and then you put the commands, right? So like what could trigger those events, and it's kind of like, it's more about the understanding, like of the teams, like how they understand the product. Then you involved in basically, initially you involved all the product side and other attendees, you know, like from all the development, all the business process. So they put all this, their stickers trying to define the flows. Eventually, you're gonna have a flow where, like, you know, like the green thing describes like where it's triggered. The blue one describes who triggered the command. The orange one is the event basically that happened, right? And by doing those iterations, like you're putting events, you aggregate those events, you're putting the commands, you're putting the stuff. So then you can aggregate the flows, and it namely, you know, like gets into the this kind of subdomain. So you understand, okay, so this kind of events and these activities describe the order, right? This kind of shopping cart and so on. That gives you a good understanding, like how the system is organized. So then you can start, you know, like even doing your coding after that, some sort of like, or at least work with specification. So then, you know, from the event storming, from this technique that you've done, you can move to a domain-driven design. So for those who's not aware of the domain-driven design, I'm kind of like give you a small description of what it is. But for those who don't know, like I encourage you to kind of at least like read few topics, like read few articles about it. You're gonna sort of like get a skill of decomposing the systems, right? And like think about them in a more behavioral thing, right? It's kind of like for those who are aware of object-oriented programming, so the domain-driven design is like object-oriented programming did right. So the domain-driven design is like again is a big pattern where you as a team work in a problem space with the stakeholders, right? So like they share their vision, so and a solution space, right? Like it's more of a technical thing. So you kind of like building a ubiquitous language as architects, right? Does with the business side as well. So names of your classes, in the terms of the domain-driven design, it's called aggregates, value object, and so on. It's called the same as entities in the real world, right? Like basket, I don't know, order, item type, and so on. And it's an iterative process, right? So like you define the things, then you again, like as in event storming, you get into the subdomain stuff, so you understand like how your system is organized, right? So then like it's kind of like each class, each big class, like big aggregate, it represents your behavior, like I don't know, of the basket, of the order, and so on. So eventually you get into the code, like this is, and it's code in the same way, so where you understand like your domain. So it's kind of like describing entire your domain. So that's why like from the domain-driven design, you can go to a microservices things, or at least the modules inside the monolith, and so on. I know it's a little bit hardcore. So the other techniques about like how you can understand more and get a specification like to work with the technical team. It's called a specification by example. So there are kind of like a couple of things that you basically do. You get, for example, a business goal, right? So like, I don't know, you're building your authentication domain, right? Or like authentication flow. So you, first of all, you kind of try to extract a particular scope, right? So then you have to visualize the example. So you literally like see it with everybody collaboratively and trying to kind of visualize all the flows. I don't know, user clicks this and then blah, 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 right? So then you're refining a specification, and the specification you have to try to kind of sort of automate, and it's all happening in the same time where you define those examples and so on. It looks like a waterfall, but again, it's kind of like iterative process. So then it kind of goes to a BDD, like a behavior-driven development. So I also recommend this kind of thing. So like, think about the feature in terms of the behavior rather than the particular implementation first. So it always goes alongside with the Gherkin notation, like this given, when, then. And there are a lot of frameworks and like a lot of languages that gives you opportunity to automate your specification. So basically, it could be your specification and acceptance criteria for the feature. And so on is going to be automation, right? So let's kind of like test your flow. And like a better understanding like what you're basically doing, because it's read like, right? Like there's a feature guest book, right? And in order to track all of my visitors as an admin, I want to give users the ability to sign on my guest, and like given with the valid credentials, given I am on the guest create page and I fill my name and blah, blah, blah. So you see it's kind of like, it could be not so deep in technical thing, right? Like what you're doing, but it gives you a better understanding as a developer. So what you're basically doing, what it's for. So it always goes with the mix specification by example. So you're visualizing those examples using this technique. So it goes to the BDD, and you basically, you can copy this kind of Gherkin notation description of your specification into the Jira ticket, right? And developers are eventually going to use it as a criteria, right? So like they're going to understand like what should appear on your page if it's a web application or it's a desktop application and so on. So it's a really cool thing. Like, yeah, I just encourage you to kind of like either read a book or at least a couple of topics that can give you a good comprehension. Katas. Kata is something goes from the Karatev, right? So like it's more about like how you get an excellence with repeating the same stuff, right? On and on again, where you have a form and excellence of doing the same stuff. For the architecture, it's also like have this kind of katas. It has some form, right? So the katas is kind of like, it's not a real thing, but it's kind of pretty close to real world examples, or like a synthetic thing where you can shape your skills as an architect. So this basically katas has a description, right? So what the domain, the user that use domain, or it's going to use domain, basically the domain or functional requirements in some additional context, where like like something that kind of like not described as a functional requirements. Again, I'm emphasizing that it's more about the training for the developers, right? So like, for the architects, how you can improve your skills as an architect. So this is called katas. It's going to be an example, right? Like if we have a sandwich, for example, shop, right? So that kind of like produces sandwiches. So there could be like 1,000, perhaps one a day, millions users. Yeah, this is the, I don't know, like a big sandwich shop. So the requirements, user will place the order in given time. For example, like you can order it online, right? So mobile device accessibility. So it's going to be promotions on different days and so on. So it gives you kind of like like a hidden language. So how you can derive the architecture things from here, right? So if you're talking about, for example, 1,000 of users, right? It kind of namely implies that it should be highly available, right, and reliable system. So it should be scalable, elastic system, right? If you're talking about it's kind of like, you see, I'm talking like this elasticity. So those utilities, again, those are architecture concerns. So if you go to the requirements and like we're talking about the placing the order, and this order could be shipped to a person. So it's, again, behind the scene, we understand that it's going to be a map somewhere, right? So like it's we're going to use like some GIS stuff, like, or Google Map, or probably like another app system. So we're going to depend on the third party thing. So and we should care about it, right? Like if this system doesn't work, how our order is going to work, and so on. So this is kind of like again, part of the reliability of our system. Again, mobile device accessibility, again, is going to be React Native application. Probably it's going to be Dart based. It's or I don't know. Probably we shouldn't care too much about the mobile experience. It's going to be just a, I don't know, like a web interface, right? It's going to be rendered properly and stuff. So you can understand like what kind of the technology behind the scene could be. So the offerings, right? So and the promotions, it's sort of kind of like that your things in your sandwich price list, right? So it's going to be customized every time with some reductions and things. So it means that behind the scene you have to apply some sort of a pattern, like a template methods or a micro kernel, so that you have a flow, but then you're able to customize it every time. Again, it's kind of like a more architecture concern, and so on. Payment online, so it should be secure, right? So like we're dealing with some of the cards details and so on, and some additional context. So that the sandwich shops across the globe is going to be a franchise thing. So it means like you shouldn't be too much of an architecture that kind of like require a lot of money. So you probably have to think about the budget. So this is the economy part where it comes from. So this is what katas look like, and it helps architect to kind of like train the skills, improve the skills. Like you read the requirements, and you kind of like behind the scene, you need to understand like what kind of the concerns of the architecture should be. That's kind of like what I'm using in my daily, so in order to kind of like keep my skills up to date. And trade-off analysis. This is one of the crucial things as well. So you remember, right? So the first law of the architecture is everything is a trade-off. So there's something should be that there's some techniques that gives you an understanding how to do this trade-off analysis. So every time you pick up one technology or approach or pattern, you have to kind of like compare it with different possible options. Not everything, it's not possible, but you know, the most appropriate. And you namely do this kind of like tables, right? And you try and, like in this example, this is compared, like we have microservices, right? And we have some functionality that's shared across these microservices. So we can put them into one library, right? And this library is going to be used by these services, or we can create another service that's going to, like, give this capability to another services. And you have to always compare what we're losing with one approach in opposed to another approach. So every time you have to do it. And there's you have to kind of like bring an architecture decision log to a stakeholders, to your business stakeholders, like why we're doing so. Probably they're not kind of like aware of like what the microservices are, but there should be an understanding even across the teams why one decision being made about another, right? So it's very important to always do the trade-off analysis of all the technologies you're picking up: React, Angular, I don't know, NoSQL, SQL, right? So we're almost done. So this is the thing that kind of like I've tried to put everything together, what the architecture and leadership, so how they overlaps. So first of all, there's kind of like points, right? So like it resonates inside of me, like when I'm thinking about the architecture and leadership, where it kind of like architecture stops, or like where this technical track stops, and then it starts the leadership thing. The first one is the Conway's law, right? I really encourage you, like familiarize yourself with the Conway's law. So organization which design systems are constraining basically each other to copy the communication structure of the services. So what it means, So if your company that you're working on, like, or your customer or project was doing a monolithic application for 20 years, and you, like, I don't know, as a developer or as an architect, you came and say, so the monolithic is shit. We're gonna do a microservice thing tomorrow. Yes, you will find out that kind of like, it's not gonna work. It's gonna be the same distributed monolith shit, because a lot of companies, they are not ready to kind of like go with the microservices or like distributed things, and vice versa. So like you were doing a microservices, something happened in your organization, and you are mentally not ready to kind of like proceed with the microservices, and then you have to go to the monoliths. So that's why it's really crucial to understand, like, if you suggest in microservices, you have to kind of like feel that the company is ready for, mature enough for a distributed, because it's teams ownership, right? So the communication, again, between teams in order to define the contracts is also viable and crucial, and it's important. So every time you think about like any bigger pattern, think about the organization. Is it ready? Is the teams ready? The mindset of them is ready. Politics. I mentioned about it, right? So disclaimer. So the technical work is a puzzle solving. You kind of like in the technical work, you have something to put together. I don't know, React. I don't know, use hooks or a lifecycle methods, right? And so on, right? Like use entity framework or Dapper, and it's kind of like just putting puzzle together. So the architecture, and it reveals all the company tensions. So like if you start modeling something, the flow is basically trying to solve the issues, try to solve the customers' issues, because the architecture and like the business and basically the software development about solving the customer issues, right? Like not kind of like, oh yeah, we're gonna do like OAuth or I know ORMs, like just talk to the database directly and so on. Think about like what the issue is solving, and that's why like modeling is hard, and that's why it's annoying. It's kind of like nobody wants to do it, like procrastinating and so on. Archetypes helps build engineering culture. This is what I mentioned, right? So some of the decisions you do, like, or you bring in some of the architectures or like some of the patterns, so they're not going to be accepted by some of the developers. As it's like in a company. So the company has a culture, right? So nobody would accept. Somebody would not accept this culture. The majority would accept, and so on. So if you remake awful software from scratch without changing the culture, how this software is creating, so you will remake the awful software. So if you're not bringing the good techniques or good engineering practices that kind of like gives you opportunity to build a proper software, so it's not going to work, right? So like you're going to end up rewriting your services, writing your product every 6 months, 6 years, or like 6 weeks, right? 6 weeks is a better solution anyway. Coaching, and again, it's kind of like it's split between the team lead and an architect. So you have to coach people, and coach nothing that like like necessary that I don't know, like beat him, like like run faster. No, you kind of listen more and asking questions. So I'm bad at it. Like I'm kind of like learning this stuff. You see, I'm like talking a lot. So I'm kind of like I didn't put this kind of book there, like you're gonna see later. But I encourage you to read, or at least familiarize yourself, like Coaching as a Habit. There's a great book. It's kind of like the narrative is pretty simple and cool. So it helps you to kind of like listen more and asking questions that basically helps your team to solve the issues, right? So like not necessarily come and solve this stuff. So that's really a good technique. And in the end, never shoot for the best architecture, but rather the least worst architecture, right? So like it's not going to be a better one, but yeah, it's like not the bad one. So this is the thing. So recommended books, there's like how many? 7, but again, like the domain-driven design things is like it could be like a one book. So it's more about the philosophy. It's about how to implement it. So like I recommend to read this one, the Valentyn one. The fundamentals, who is like interested in software architecture track. So this is the really cool one. So basically these 2 books is all about the same thing, but it's more about the trade-off analysis, like how you kind of like pick one pattern on another. Anyway, if you kind of like encounter with the books authored by the Neil Ford, take it. It's kind of like it's one of the best authors in this area. Specification by example. the design that intensive application, like yeah, so the famous book with the Spig, right? So it's kind of like it's not about the architecture itself, it's like the understanding of data storages, right? And it's kind of like opens your eyes anyway. And building evolutionary architecture, so like in a code, right? Like in a solid principle, so you have to kind of like bring the code that's kind of closed for changes but open for the modification. Sorry, closed for the modification but open for the extension, right? So that's kind of like the same for the architecture. And I think I'm about 10. This is the, oh, sorry. It's not been expected, right? Yes, this is the first mention, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like our social networks of companies, yeah. Okay, go ahead. If you have any, if you're still alive, or let's go to the pizza. Go. No, there's still 3 person, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that the presentation was
Yeah.
Was really perfect, and
Yes.
I
Yeah, it's called Structurizer. It's basically by this Simon Brown, who basically coined this technology, or like the way how you visualize the things. It's called Structurizer. It's for the .NET and it's available for the Java. You namely describe what you want in the language, in the markup. Just it's not the YAML. It's kind of like more a free thing. It has some form of the markup, but it's kind of like you just put words and then you see like it's kind of like split on 2 parts. On the first part you put the language. Probably have you tried Lucidchart? So there is like a markup language for the UML sequences.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't free, exactly. Some things that you anyway, yeah. So you describe in language what you want, and then it draws the thing that you want. There are a lot of tools basically around this. Yes, yeah, yeah. I'll probably need to suggest Mira that kind of like implement this feature. So. I totally agree with it. I mean, like, DDD not for every single product, basically. If your product or your domain that you're working on has so it already has a legacy code, right? So probably it's not a good choice for a good fit for DDD, because DDD is more for the complex domains, for the complex business logic domains. For example, even in my a project in my company that we're working with right now. So we have about like 32 microservices, so like from like 4 big capabilities, but 2 of them only using the DDD, because basically all other is just a CRUD operations. Like you don't have like have any you know complex logic. But if you want core domains, like core services to like work solid, and then you have opportunity to work from scratch where you have a refactoring budget and time, I would recommend go with DDD, because DDD gives you an opportunity to create a business code, right, or isolate a business code, because from the infrastructure code. So the business code will scale slowly, right? So like the business rule won't change too fast than the technologies around it. So that's why like it's the place. Again, it depends. It's trade-off, right? Whether you have a teammates who comprehend it or ready to learn, or you in learning mode, because like team could be in surviving mode, you have to deliver, right? And in architecture, again, like architecture is about consultancy, the team lead and team, it's about delivery, right? So like you just need to deliver fast. So that's why if you have time, right, a budget, you in the learning mode. So where you have like some of the people who can learn and willing to learn, it's a really great solution to kind of like make a solid system, solid foundation for your business domain. Yeah, so it's kind of like not for everybody and not for every single bits of piece of feature. Sorry, that's kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's kind of like two answers, right? The first answer, like, I'm every time tested and examined like whether I'm a good software developer, right? Like, do you know what the SQL is? Like, I don't know what the SQL procedures. I don't know, like the hooks, why the hooks needed, like, and so on. That's fine. 1.5 hours, it's kind of like it's a better really time range, because like for example, one of our features that we're doing right now, like 3 weeks, we argue in 3 weeks with the development team, and it's fine. It's kind of like, I mean, yes, I mean, like we can do it endlessly, but then the budget will just end up at some point. Anyway, it's kind of like, it's more about the coaching. Sometimes I'm just sitting with the developer and trying to code with him, like a pair programming. We're using the live share, and like, for example, the current project is based on the Python, and we're like sitting and like I'm teaching somebody how to do the object-oriented programming. We have some of developers kind of like, they came from the functional world, and that's why, and we kind of like, force DDD, which is like object-oriented programming and behavior-driven thing. And yeah, we're sitting with them and like trying like, oh yeah, cool, this worked, okay, that sounds like, so this is more about the coaching. So if somebody kind of like refuses or don't understand, again, there's reasons. Because they don't know technology, they don't want to know technology, they just don't like, and you have to understand like why you don't like it. Like, okay, bring me your decision. And you as an architect or like a team lead or tech lead, you have to ask why you thinking so. Because for example, last week we were arguing, we're gonna put, for example, a repository level, right, in C#, like it's gonna abstract the communication database, right? And we're gonna put some of the concurrency constraints into the code itself. I don't know, like the optimistic concurrency, for example, rather than just, I don't know, like creating the constraints in databases, right? Because like developers saying like, yeah, we're using the SQL, and the SQL out of the box has this, like the unique constraints. Why are we just not using this stuff? I said, yes, that's fine. It's kind of like for example, the business logic then leaks to a technology, the exact technology. So tomorrow we're going to be on the NoSQL, probably not. But again, there's a temptation then like put everything into database, like stored procedures. Then we don't need basically a REST CRUD level. So just, like go request a database directly. So just secure somehow, and it's going to be fast and run and so on. So it's more about, like coaching people as well as learning from them as well, And coaching is like you come and ask them, like you start with like, yeah, what's in your mind, and then it starts. So it's more about the things, and we not always win. Kind of like I accept kind of like a lot of things that it depends on the context, time, budget, and so on. And again, like sometimes like sitting three weeks arguing, I'm kind of just like give up. Okay. Yeah, probably the smell of the pizza, yeah, makes the job. Yeah. Okay, so then thanks everybody. So then we can just. All right, let's try to be quick. Здорово.